Hello and welcome back to another Daytex show with Greg Stafford. That's me. I host these Daytex videos as often as I can, usually Monday through Saturday. As we work our way progressively through the ancient biblical texts, we also look at other related texts, whether they're specifically in the traditional biblical canon or not, if they're relevant, if they have credible manuscript support, and the information we're reading is also supported by other corroborating evidence, then we will consider it in order to gain an understanding of how others at that time viewed the biblical and related texts. So we'll look at other histories as well, other religions, as they often do relate to a worldwide group of people at different times and different ages, like today, or back in what is often referred to as Noah's day, an account of which is recorded in the biblical text of Genesis chapter 6, 7, 8, and 9, and thereafter, in terms of the families of Noah that migrated after the ark settled in eastern Turkey. So we'll get to that point and discuss a whole lot of other information. But before we do, we're going to consider some additional material that tells us about the time before the flood occurred, the time when Noah was alive, and the time when, according to our last day text, there were also giants in the earth. Giants that appeared to be offspring of the sons of God or divine beings, spirits, that took on human form like they did in Genesis 19, even to the point of eating, like Jesus also did after he was resurrected, in our view. These are accounts in the Bible, in biblical texts, of spirit beings who manifested human forms in ways that allowed them to do human things. And so in the Genesis account that we read last time, Genesis 6, 1 through 4, it talked about the sons of God coming down and taking human daughters as wives. In fact, let's go back to that account because I want to discuss one more point in a little bit more detail. I explained, based on several reasons, contextually and textually, why the sons of God in Genesis 6, 2, right here, cannot be human beings. Why they're not human sons of other men, humans, who are taking human daughters. Because if you notice, in addition to what I described yesterday, and you can see I have some of the terms that I highlighted to show differentiation and connection yesterday. For example, if you look in verse 1, you can see the red terms, and daughters were born to them. And it's referring to the them right here. I'm going to highlight that in green so you all can see where I'm going with this. Refers to this, the mankind that shot up in number. Okay? These daughters that these sons of God were noticing were born to these menkind or Adam kind. This would include women and men, of course, right? Because even though it refers to the men as the ones to whom these daughters were born, we know that the whole process, which is described first with Adam and Eve, involves the man knowing the woman sexually and them producing a child with the aid of Jaho. And so what I want you to remember, in addition to what I pointed out yesterday in our day text show over these texts, to show that the sons of God in verse 2 right here in the blue are not human sons, is this. Notice in verse 2, the sons of God were noticing. I'm going to highlight that in green as well, because I'm going to show you the connection. They were noticing whom? The daughters of mankind. Well, as we saw right here, these daughters were born to these men right here. How would these daughters be born to these men if the men, which would be sons of other men, right, all the way from Adam, Cain, all those who came forth from Adam and Eve, they would have to already be knowing and noticing other human women in order to have daughters born to them, right? So there's no question that this noticing right here that I put in green is different. than the noticing and knowing that has to happen here in order for them to shoot up in number, for men to become numerous, and for daughters to be born to them. So men are becoming numerous. Why? Because they're having relations with daughters of men. So sons and daughters of men are relating with each other, and their numbers are shooting up. And during this time, the sons of God notice the daughters, that they're beneficial or beautiful in ways having to do with reproduction and femininity. So I don't want to get back onto yesterday's text. You can look at that video for more information. But I wanted to highlight this point because even though it was kind of alluded to, other points were highlighted and expressed more. But I believe the fact that in order for daughters to be born to mankind and for mankind's numbers to shoot up, they already were knowing and noticing, of course, the women with whom they were having reproductive relations for this to all happen. Okay, so the mankind, their numbers are shooting up and daughters are being born to them because they're noticing and knowing sexually other women. As these daughters are born to the men and women who are sexually reproducing, sons of God notice the daughters. So there's no way the sons of God could be the same, or in any way even sons of men, because not only does it say sons of God versus sons of men, and here obviously daughters born to men, then, and it could have obviously said sons of men. So, and in the same way, I would say, in addition to yesterday, mankind, not so much here, but when it gets down here for the giants being in the earth, and it says, if you notice in verse 4, the sons of God were entering to be with the daughters of men. When the giants were numerous on the earth, it connects the population of the giants in verse 4 with the sons of God entering to be with the daughters of men. And then it says, and giants were born to them. So these sons of God took the daughters of the men that were the mankind, the sons of mankind, the sons of Adam kind, just like it says in verse 1, who were relating with the daughters of Adam kind and producing daughters that the sons of God began to notice as they matured and grew up, and they saw how the whole process worked, obviously. So, and we discussed in my last video essentially the type of the time frame that was in place from the time when Adam and Eve were banished from the garden up until the time when the flood occurred in Noah's 600th year. So again, you can watch that video for more information, or look at my note to Genesis 6:4. But I hope that point is clear. If not, let me know. But I think it's obvious that the human sons of Adam were already knowing and noticing the daughters of Adam, and then reproducing and having daughters born to them, that the sons of God then began to notice. It wouldn't make sense for the sons of God to be humans, because the sons of humans were already noticing and even having sexual relations with the daughters of humans to have these daughters born to them. So I think that's pretty clear, and I just wanted to emphasize that point. Now let's go to today's day text, which is Genesis 6:5 through 12. I'm going to go ahead and read the Hebrew translation first, followed by the Greek. At times I may stop and make comments, or I'll just read straight through, and then we'll go back through and highlight a few points. Okay, so now we come forward from yesterday's day text and then what I just discussed, so that we can see clearly now, as with the other information I presented previously, the sons of God are likely the ones Jude is referring to when he's also discussing or referencing Enoch in his letter, and in verse 6 refers to the angels who were punished for leaving their position. And so if that is the case in Genesis 6, these sons of God having these relations with humans, human daughters, producing these giants, that's the description of the first 4 verses of Genesis. And so as a result of these things, and humankind, men, as you're going to see both here and in the prior case, where it refers to, let's just go back up there real briefly. It talks about Jah's spirit not remaining in these men. And yesterday I showed and discussed how that's obviously the humans that were born up to a point where they were living hundreds of years. And then with the sons of God taking the daughters of men and reproducing these giants who are going to inherit this long lineage, Jaho is restricting the time, the length of time in which they can live and act in these ways. And I would say that even though the humans that were living in these long periods of time and giving birth to these daughters who were being taken by these sons of God, and that Jah limiting their existence would thereby also limit the giants' existence, they were the byproducts of these sons of God and human daughters. I believe that even here, when it says these men in Genesis 6:3, my spirit, when Jah says, my spirit will not contend with mankind, or in these men, is primarily a reference to actual humans, Adam kind. But remember, when Jesus took human form, actually became a man, the last Adam, he wasn't a sinful being, and yet he was still considered what? The Son of Man, because he was fully human. He still had the Holy Spirit in the biblical text, and so he could do things. But even as he said, he couldn't do anything at all unless the Father was with him and allowed him to do what he did. And so he not only took on human form like the angels did in Genesis 19, in the biblical texts, which use these texts as a backdrop, Jesus actually is born as a human in order to cancel out the debt that we inherited from Adam. And so he's called the last Adam in 1 Corinthians 15:45. But he's called the Son of Man. And so in the same way, I would argue that while not a giant, he's still the product, right? Jesus is the product of spirit and human, Mary in this case. So whatever it was that the sons of God were doing in order to reproduce, obviously with Jah, he did not have sexual relations with Mary. He didn't manifest a physical form, but the Holy Spirit, being a spirit, triggered within Mary the reproductive process that Jah wanted to be done through the line of David, but with the spirit of his son, so that he could do what he did. And so in the same way, though, or in a similar way, I should say, I don't really know how the sons of God, whether they directly sexually mated with human daughters, or whether they were able to do something similar to what Jaho's spirit did with Mary, that is, being able to manipulate her female utility for reproduction in ways that allowed them to produce these giants. See, we're not told the manner in which they were able to actually produce these giants, whether it was purely sexual or something more. We know from the biblical account involving Jesus that it's not uncommon for spirits to do this, apparently, in ways where, similar to the account here in Genesis 6, they're able to replicate. They're able to reproduce. And so, I wouldn't limit the reference to men to just humans in every case. I think up here, clearly there's a difference because the giants aren't born yet. The giants haven't been produced. Here, the sons of God notice the daughters, then they take them, and then the giants come to be in the earth at that time and after. Why? Because the sons of God were coming to the daughters. It specifically says that. That's why the giants were in the earth, and they had born to them the same kinds of strong men who from long ago were of special reputation. So just keep in mind, from this point forward, I believe that men, or reference to mankind, can and more likely does include reference to the giants, the human hybrids, at least in terms of the judgment Jah's bringing upon mankind from this point forward, from the point forward that the sons of God begin noticing the daughters of men and then taking for themselves these daughters and reproducing these giants. It's at that point that Jahoah begins to take action. First, by limiting the age of the humans with whom the sons of God were reproducing. And then, as we're going to see in today's day text, he's going to limit it. He's going to take even further action. So let's get to that now that we have those points well in mind. It's good that we do that, though. Review the connecting material from the last video to today so we're all on the same page. I wanted to go through a few more points so we had them clear in mind. And let me know if you have any questions. But if not, if it's clear, let's go forward. Genesis 6, 5 through 12. Hebrew translation. But Jaho began to see much evil because of mankind in the earth. And that's what I mean. So now I believe the reference to mankind here is not just specific to Adamkind, but to the product of the sons of God and the daughters of men, the giants. So, Jaho began to see much evil because of mankind in the earth, and every type of thought, every form or concept in a person's mind was pure evil all the time. Verse 5, Greek translation, but Lord God Jaho was watching, because the bad things of men were increased upon the earth, and everything, anything he carefully intended to do in his heart was based on evil things every single day, or all the days. Verse 6, Hebrew translation. So Jaho began to feel sorry he had made mankind in the earth, and he began to feel displeasure within himself. Verse 6, Greek translation, then God Jaho, and I worded it that way because you know how we often will say Jaho God, and I still do in some cases. I'm actually moving away from that and trying to use the title God before the name, the way we do, for example, when we say things like King David, King Solomon. We don't say David King or Solomon King, but because God displaced the actual name of God and became a name, it's easier to use in that way. But I'm trying to kind of reverse it a little bit, put it in its proper place in relative to the divine name, which even though here I'm using in brackets, that's because it's in the Hebrew text the Greek translation is translating, and originally I believe that's what it contained, based on the best available and earliest evidence. Okay, so just want to explain those things so as we go forward, you're not like, hey, why'd you say God Jaho? That's why. Then God Jaho was forced to evaluate what was happening, for he made mankind upon the earth, and now it was of great concern. Verse 7, Hebrew translation, then Jaho began to say, I will erase mankind, whom I have created from upon areas of the earth, from mankind to land animal, to crawling creature, to bird of the sky heavens, because I have felt sorry that I have made them, or that I made them. Verse 7, Greek translation, and God said, I will eliminate from the surface of the earth mankind. This would be not just obviously men, but men, women, everyone. And like I said, possibly also the giants, although I more so see the reference to giants as being included in the reference to mankind in verse 5. But again, that's not a necessary inclusion. I just believe we shouldn't exclude the giants from the references to humans or humankind once they're actually in the earth and they've been referenced as the product of the sons of God coming to the daughters of men. So just keep that in mind. It's not like critical to anything. I just don't want you, in terms of thinking, because of the way the text reads, right? It really just refers to men, mankind. But although we know from the earlier reference in our prior text that giants are here, and after that, the time that it referenced before. So we don't want to exclude them. We don't want to pretend they're not around at all. All right, verse 7. Let's see. And so let me just reread verse 7 of the Greek in case I didn't read that part. I know I read the Hebrew. And God said, I will eliminate from the surface of the earth mankind, whom I made, from mankind to land animal, to reptiles, to the bird of sky heaven, since I felt great anger because I made them. It's terrible, isn't it, to think of Jaho that way? But I don't mean terrible in the sense that it's bad to think that God thinks that way. I mean that anyone, including us or those before us, made him feel that way. Right? Have you ever felt a certain way towards something you know you really love, but it's doing something so much so that you actually do regret? We feel sorry that we did something for it, whether it's a family member, someone whom we loved in another way, or just some relationship that we thought was something that it ended up not being, but not because of anything we did. And I'm not using myself as any example here or anybody specifically. I'm just using a hypothetical that we've all felt or been a part of in some way. That is thinking somebody's not doing the thing that we really wanted them to do, that's good for them to do, and that they should do, but they're not doing it. Well, again, whether it's a child, a mate, anything, in its relative sense or way. We felt that way. We felt sorry that we put that kind of trust in someone for something that they didn't reciprocate. They didn't respond to in the way we were hoping, and that we really set them up to succeed doing. So if we feel that way, well, that's not a consequence of sin. That's a consequence of us feeling let down by someone. And then it getting so bad that we start to think, well, I wish I hadn't given them that opportunity. I wish I would have picked someone else, or I'm just sad that they continue to make these choices in spite of everything I've done for them. We've felt that before. We feel that because that's how we're made. We're made in Jah's image. It's not a mistake or an accident. That's exactly what this text is talking about. It's not a limitation or an imperfection. Not on him, right? How could it be? Is it an imperfection on you because you feel sorry that someone didn't fulfill what you set them up to do? That you regret you did all that you did to put them in the position based on how they responded to it? No, that's not a sign of a weakness or flaw in you. That's you hoping for the best for someone else to do, and they're just not doing it. And so you wanted them to succeed and or fulfill whatever it is we're using as our example here, so much that when they didn't, it made you regret the process. Maybe the effect was almost the opposite in a way that you would hope that it wasn't as bad as it ended up being, and so never happened. It's like that. It's not a flaw. It's not an imperfection. It's what we do all the time when we hope there's a correction and it doesn't happen. Or there's something that we set up to happen and become what it should be and it doesn't happen. That's what's happening. And it happens in us because it happens in him, because he gives people opportunities to please him. He gives humans chance after chance after chance in ways that then we get caught in a circumstance, we get consequence. It's what we're choosing. It's what others are choosing. It's what he's allowing or doing depending on what he's choosing. But in the case of the time before the flood right here, it's Jahoah watching what's happening. Just like it says right there in verse 5. Greek translation, Lord God Jahoah was watching. Hebrew translation, but Jahoah began to see. He was watching, not just visibly, but every type of thought in a person's mind. It was evil all the time. Now we have our thoughts, and the thoughts that we have are because of the spirit that Jahoah gave us. We wouldn't have it without that. That's why when we die, our body's still intact until it decomposes. But our spirit's not there. It's gone back. He knows our thoughts because it's his spirit we're using. No one can escape him. But he will allow us to choose things, especially those made in his image, in ways that he will judge. And at this point, the judgment was such that he felt regret. The earth was now a concern. The earth that he made with all those things we talked about in Genesis 1 and 2 and the start of 3, and then it went, crazy. That's where it was supposed to go. Now it's like, oh no. That's what it is. He felt great displeasure The earth was great concern. Could you imagine Jaho? Well, it's right here, so we don't have to imagine much beyond that. And it's not the most pleasant thing at that. But here it is. It's part of our text. So obviously we should dwell on it to the extent that we can try to help avoid bringing these things back. Not in every respect, because we're not everyone. But this is pretty much everyone at this time. The whole earth, it appears, had gone blind. Except for one. It says right here, verse 8. Let's finish off our reading. Hebrew translation, but Noah, which means rest, found approval in the eyes of Jaho. Verse 8, Greek translation, but Noah. I'll use the Greek transliteration at times, but I'm going to switch. In my translation, I'll break for a moment. I'm going to start to put in quotations the Greek transliteration. I'll use it once. And then from there, I will use the more common English term so that there's not much confusion. And I'll explain these different things in the preface to whatever translation I release. But just between you and me, a few thoughts on how I'm going to do some of these variances in the pronunciation of proper names. But Noah found the right standing, or grace, in the sight of Lord God Jaho. Verse 9, Hebrew translation. These are the pastimes of Noah. Noah was someone who did things right. He was just right in every way during his generation. Noah walked here and there, or lived life with God. Verse 9, Greek translation. These are the histories of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, he being everything necessary among his generation. Noah was pleasing to God. Verse 10, Hebrew translation. Then Noah had 3 sons called Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Verse 10, Greek translation. Also Noah brought forth 3 sons, Sem, Ham, and Japheth. Verse 11. I'll do the same thing as I was mentioning with Noah. I'll put quotes around the first instance. I don't know if this is the first one in Genesis for these names. I think they came up before. But I will when I get through the edited edition. Just put the first instance so the person who's reading the Greek translation knows how the Greek text transliterates the Hebrew name. Sometimes that can be important or interesting, depending on what you're researching. So I'll leave that there for now. Let's finish off with verses 11 and 12. Hebrew translation, but the earth began to lose its value according to God when the earth became filled with error, or what is not right. Greek translation, verse 11, but the earth became unusable in the sight of God, ruined, and it was filled with moral failures. Verse 12, Hebrew translation, so God began to notice, and behold, the earth lost its value. It's twice been cursed now. And now the sons of God are taking the daughters of men and producing these giants. All of humankind, where it concerned his chosen path, was in error upon the earth. Verse 12, Greek translation, our last day text today. Then Lord God saw the earth, and it had become destroyed, because all humankind, all flesh, and here's where I would also include, or at least certainly allow for, but more so than some of the preceding texts, a reference to the giants, all flesh, humankind, which they are a part because of the use of the daughters of humans to reproduce with the sons of God, these giants. All humankind, all flesh, destroyed its chosen path upon the earth. Now, I don't think we're that way today. I mean, I hope we're not. I know it looks bad in many ways, and sometimes it is, but it's also not. There are many times when we're able to do things, whether like Noah or not, we're doing good things in imitation of whom we believe is Jah's son, the Messiah. But we also see that there are times when we, and I'm sure Noah, have failures, right? Just because Noah was singled out by Jah doesn't mean that he didn't have any moral failure or he didn't have any problem. But comparatively, he stood out. He was right with God during this time. So that tells us that God looks at things relatively to the generation within which a person acts. There are things that are done during certain periods of time that aren't done other times. And so these are the past. Noah was someone who did things right. It refers to the past times of Noah. And then it says he did things right. He was just right in every way. Now, that's how the Bible will often speak. But it doesn't mean he didn't have any flaw or any mistake, or that he wouldn't if he hadn't to this point, which would be unusual. But we don't know how long people were living without actually sinning in ways where they would then be liable to death, like Adam and Eve were. So we don't know whether Noah had lived in such a righteous way that maybe he hadn't sinned to that extent before the flood and then after he did. We all do, except for the one. Either way, we believe according to these texts that Noah was a righteous man at this time. He was what was necessary among his generation. Every generation has what's needed. And it's not an accident. It's part of what Jah is seeding. It's a part of the seed of the woman that Jehovah said would crush the head of the serpent. And we get bruised often, but not to that extent. And so we're in this relationship, humans and spirits, sons of God, daughters of men, sons of men, sons of God, Jehovah, the Son of God. It's very similar when you consider the things that are described here as far as what actually ruined the earth. We look back again at verse 11. It said the earth lost its value when the earth became filled with error, or what is not right. And a way that you could render the Greek text is filled with moral failures. All right, so what would be some moral failures? Well, obviously, stealing, lying, cheating. Jehovah loves what? He loves a perfectly balanced scale, a good measure. He loves honesty. He loves people who apologize when they make a mistake. He knows you do something bad. He knows I do something bad. But do we acknowledge it, or do we cultivate it? Now, do we promote the bad? Do we draw attention to the bad? Hey, everyone, check this out. Or do we like, no, you know what? I want to try to work this out. So there's a difference. And I think many of us are trying to do the things that make a difference so that our chosen path isn't totally ruined and filled with error on the earth like it became here. All humankind. And this was a different time. And I don't think we can reach this point to this extent again, except for perhaps until the end, like when Jesus says, there will come a time that hasn't come to be until that time, and that the days of Noah would be like the days of the Son of Man. But at this point, all of the humans except for Noah had destroyed their way. And we know that according to the Christ, those who follow his way are the salt of the earth. What does salt do? It keeps it preserved. So it's not ruined. So it's not destroyed. We're keeping the earth from being destroyed when we do the things that Jehovah made us to do. When we have relations with people in the right way, like heterosexuals do. We're doing the things Jah made us to do. When we help people with weaknesses. Maybe they have a problem with homosexuality. We don't want to tolerate that or promote it, but that doesn't mean we can't be a good person to people with problem habits. We don't shun people just because they're having a problem getting control of a moral failure. Now, if they're going to make it more difficult for us, we're not obligated to allow them to make our life ruined or destroyed. So we have to have boundaries. And we have to be able to say to people, you know, I like you as a person. I want to try to do this with you, or if we have to work together, of course, let's get this job done. But this is my way and this is what I'm here to do. Otherwise, we don't want to allow our path to be corrupted with error so that our way is destroyed upon the earth, right? Maybe we fall in hard times. Maybe we have a hard time paying the bills and we get tempted to commit crime. We don't have to do that. If we have faith and we truly believe and we ask Jaho to take care of our needs, has he ever not done that to you? I've never seen it happen to me. And even though I've made it as hard on myself as I probably can, he's still been there for me. And I know he's been there for you. So it's just hard for us to keep believing because in the world it's difficult to do. We have people who are good or are trying in the sense that they're trying. That's what I mean by good. And we have others who don't. Right? We have a lot of information that's false, and we have some that we're trying to find that's probably accurate. So that difficulty makes it hard for us to cultivate a faithful attitude toward everything because we're constantly questioning what's going on. Well, when you have faith, you're not questioning. That's what I often talk about. You already know what's going on. You believe, you understand, and you go. So today that's become more difficult. Maybe not as difficult, or maybe it has reached that level as far as the entire earth, only now there are others in it, like Christians, who are going to believe until the end. And there was Noah as well. So the comparison I'm making is that Jaho is always going to take consideration of those who are doing the things they were supposed to do versus just let things get out of control and further the destructive course that we often put ourselves on. It's not so much making a bad choice. It's not so much going the wrong path. It's, are you ever going to correct that? Are you ever going to get back on course? They didn't get back on course at this point, and it got so bad, Jahuah had to change course. Nothing stopped his purpose, right? Genesis chapter 3:15, which I'm going to discuss further this Sunday in our CW Jah Talk series, talks about the promised seed. Well, Jahuah knew about the promise when he was evaluating the earth right here and seeing that it had lost its value. But he knew the seed was still a part of his purpose. But things were just getting out of hand now to the point where he had to take corrective measures. His sons, his spirit sons, were getting involved with humans. The product of their relationship were these hybrids or giants. And the earth had become filled with violence or error, incorrect choices, sin, basically, right? The thing that brings about death. The thing Jah didn't make us to do. In one sense, it's a crude analogy, but it'd be like trying to use your car to fly, right? It's not made for that, right? So if we're gonna we use what is made for what it is made for. If we try to use what Jah makes for some other way he didn't make it for, and it's actually against what he made, there's no way we can continue. It's not allowed. The process of sin takes hold. Death then begins. And the extent to which we make more and more incorrect choices, we and the environment and the entire earth can lose its value. Why? Verse 12. Because it becomes and we become filled with error. Error upon the earth. Error in the Hebrew text is translated in the Greek text with terms that involve destruction, ruination. So to the extent possible, we want to try not to ruin the beautiful earth that Jah has given us. We don't control everything, obviously, but we do control some things, and we can do our part. And every bit counts. So the extent to which we could show love to everyone and treat each other the way we want to be treated, then we're going to be promoting the good things that Jah made us to do. And the earth won't seem as ruined in ways that will make him feel regret in any way similar to what he felt back then. Because it was in no way supposed to be like that. These accounts show us that clearly. And the rest of the account, as we consider further our day text to follow, is going to show us even more about how Jah is very much like you and me. Or I should say, we're very much like him. All of us are. Not only if we choose to be, but because of who we are and who he made us to be. The way we act or respond to things. Like feeling sorry. Not so much for the things that we've done. That's one type of feeling sorry, right? We know we did something wrong, but we have a condition that our desire got the better of us, or we were just dumb. But we do regret it, right? It's not, regardless of the fact that we did it, we don't want to keep doing it, or something's making us go backwards. That's different from someone who cultivates an attitude like, hey, I'm going to keep, look what I've done. I'm the baddest, this, that, and so it's no regret at all, right? That's their chosen path. It's ruined. And they destroy themselves and everyone around them, usually pretty fast. So in this case, Jaho stepped in because of a variety of things. And in our view, he will step in at the end of the next generation or age, not necessarily generation in terms of a period of time, but the next period of time in which he brings an end to the age and then creates something new. So before that time comes, let's show Jah what we can do. We don't have to give in to the ruination of our sinful tendencies, and nor do we have to make life harder for everybody who just does things that we don't agree with, or maybe chooses a course that isn't the course that we want to follow. We're here to do the best we can. And if people want to follow us or we want to follow them in doing the same things, then that's what we should do. If we don't, leave each other be, go forward and do the best that you can do. And I hope these day texts are helping everybody, because they give me an insight when I go through the material again, that when I reconsider and think about again, it helps me regain a sense of awareness for the earth that we're in, the things that we're here to do, what happened before, how it affected Jah, and what we can do going forward. And so to that end, I thank you once again for joining me. I'll see you again tomorrow for another day text in Genesis.